Chaos Control is a sci-fi themed rail shooter that was developed by Infogrames for the PlayStation in 1995. The game also got a subsequent release on multiple different consoles, with the CDI, Macintosh, Sega Saturn and MS-DOS versions of the game being released into the mainstream. This game is an on-rails type of shooter where you interact through shooting different elements and objects on the screen, as you don't have full control over the ship or the vehicle that is present in the game, where you view through the cinematic features that are available. Your only focus is to shoot everything on the screen that comes your way. An enhanced version of the game was re-released later in 1996 for the Sega Saturn only, with tweaked features. So the idea of the game is that the world has become overrun with aliens, and you're tasked as a pilot to take out the leader of the alien resistance. So you start off from fighting across levels, starting from the likes of New York, Manhattan, all the way up into like space, where you go through the likes of old spaceships, kind of like where you go through like old space stations and different types of satellite arrays, all the way into the alien ship itself. Now the gameplay in this game is quite short, like you can really finish the entirety of the game in a little under an hour, sometimes a half an hour depending on your skill level. And the more you play the game, all of the enemies do have like a fixed movement pattern, so you can get familiar as you play the game even more as to where enemies are going to pop up, so you can learn through memory of how to interact with the game. The game itself now did get mixed reviews in the magazines, and one of the things that it was criticised on was the lack of inventory in terms of weapons, as even though you can shoot multiple objects on the screen, you only have access to your laser cannon or rail cannon that's on the ship, your standard weapon. Even though you can fire it at fast pace and quite frantically, you don't have access to any other weapons or like tracking rockets that can take out multiple enemies on the screen, so you are limited in terms of what you have available to you. The Sega Saturn version also had access and had compatibility with the Virtua Gun accessory, whereas with the likes of other versions of the game, even likes with the PlayStation, you didn't have that ability. It wasn't really compatible with any light gun peripherals at the time, so that in itself kind of went against the game in some ways. But aside from some of the elements as I mentioned, the game itself does have a very unique kind of concept and setting. But what's pretty cool about it, even though your only task is to shoot everything on screen, but it also has great cinematics and visuals. It almost plays out like an interactive movie as such, as you're just shooting everything that moves towards you on the screen, but everything plays out around you like as if you're literally just watching a movie, or you're in like a vehicle that's moving around without you being able to control it. Your only job and task is literally just to shoot everything that you can see. But even for an early game, not just on the PlayStation, but even in terms of the likes of other consoles and computers at the time, the visuals are really good. When you look back at even technology, what they were able to produce even back then was quite an achievement. And the graphics in the game, in fairness, do look like really high movie quality for the time, as the game, as I mentioned, does feel like a whole movie in its own right. But even with the gameplay, each area has like 3 different phases before you move on to the next level, and in some cases you might have to interact with a few like mini bosses throughout each of the levels, and you'll have to destroy them before you can move on to the next section of the level or the next phase. The phases themselves are fairly short. The thing is, you have like a health bar, but that health bar lasts and has to last you for the entirety of the entire level. So each of the 3 phases in each of the levels, your health bar is the one continuous thing throughout. So if you die in that time, you will end up having to go back to the start of the game pretty much, or the start of the level. One thing to note though is when you do get further on in the game, especially when you get to the last few areas, when you get to the likes of the alien ship itself, unlike the earlier levels in the game where the path you follow is all predetermined, as you don't have any control of that, in the later areas of the game you do have some level of control of some of the areas that you can move to. So when you've gotten to a certain point on the ship, you will have hit like a crossroads as such, and you will have to point the reticle or the pointer towards a certain area of the screen, and you'll see like an arrow that will change, and that will point you in the direction that you can go. In some cases you can go up, left or right, so depending on which avenue you take, it can either set you off to continue further on into the level where you have to destroy much larger and more difficult enemies, or it can put you in a position where it can instantly leave you with a game over screen, or in some cases what it will do is it will put you directly back to the start of the ship, and you have to start the entire level all over again and go through the same process. So there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of trial and error and trying to figure out where exactly to go, because it doesn't give you really any indications as to which is the right path to take. It's really up to yourself to figure that out just through multiple playthroughs. Another thing to note that on the last level, that even though if you do take a wrong turn and you go back to the very start of the level, the problem is the level itself doesn't reset. Your health bar that you've had from that point on, if you have very little health and you're sent back to the very start of the ship, you will still have that same amount of health regardless of where you are on the level until you die, which in a lot of ways can be very frustrating, because when you do eventually find an area, you'll find that you'll get destroyed very quickly and then it's game over. So all your hard work will pretty much be undone and you will have to start the entire game over again. But the gameplay is short for the most part, so you'll find you'll get back to there before long. Another thing to note, that even though it is a competent shooter, because of the lack of other weapons that you can use, because you've only got your laser cannon to shoot, the gameplay does get quite repetitive after a while. And I even found this myself after playing it. Even though I played through most of the game as much as I could, I still found myself after a while, you kind of found it a little bit monotonous, as it is just the same thing over again. But with these type of early games, that is to be expected. But what it lacks in different areas, it definitely makes up for in its visual appeal, as graphically for a very early game on the PlayStation, even on other consoles, graphically it is phenomenal to look at. It really does have beautiful visuals, and the fact is that it plays like an interactive movie. In some ways it feels like it's way ahead of its time, so that in itself, it is worth an experience just for that alone. If you do like rail shooters or light gun style shooters, it is worth a look, especially if you're into more futuristic style type of games. There's no harm in having a look at this, because it definitely combines elements of all of those aspects in mind. And I would love to know your thoughts on Chaos Control, if you have played it yourself back in the day, and if so, did you even know the game existed? Do you enjoy these rail type of shooters on the PlayStation, or maybe not? I'd love to hear what stories you have in this game, so be sure to share them down in the comments below. So if you have enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to be updated when future videos are released. And if you'd like to see more videos of similar type of games that were also released on the system, then be sure to check out the playlists here on screen, and I'll leave a link in the description to more games that cover a lot of other aspects with similar features and the like that were released on the system also. So be sure to check those videos out, and until next time, make sure to keep playing those classic games and enjoying them, and keep those gaming memories alive.